Hi, folks. My name is Greg Miles. I'm also on the Impact Award Committee at the Financial Writers, and also I was, by the way, with Business Week magazine, Bloomberg, and CNBC for most of my career. I did a lot of investigative reporting, and it's real hard. That's why I respect the mammoth pieces you folks put out. I wanted to start out, Jeff, with you, okay, to talk about, when you first got your first foothold in this story, right? You had Frances Haugen, your prime source, a Facebook whistleblower, and you started every talk, get the documents. Did you have any idea that this was going to mushroom into this far-reaching series that would have political and social consequences?
When I first met up with her, because this story starts out with LinkedIn spamming the hell out of everyone who touched Facebook's civic integrity team, there was a thesis there, which is that they've just finished up the 2020 election, and that the company was going to be soon unraveling a lot of the work they've done, which the company had been very forthright about, and it was a reasonable assumption that they were going to be pissed, and that seemed like a good group of people to talk to, so I sent out a whole bunch of notes. She didn't get in touch for a month, so it was a complete waste of time. That LinkedIn outreach, I'd sent like 30 notes, got nothing back, except a note from Ryan Mack at saying at BuzzFeed at the time, saying that I was being made fun of internally for my note, which they realized correctly was a LinkedIn spam effort. A month later, however, the day that the civic team got disbanded, Frances got in touch, and when I met up with her, it was weird in the sense
She has to
that,
meet you in person.
We talked on the phone. It was a good conversation. She was definitely fit the criteria of someone who would know directly about some of the work that had been happening related to the election, but came, I think, with a sort of stronger, made clear that everyone I'd ever spoken to at the company who was kind of a whistleblower, they'd left already and they'd been burned out when they left. And she made clear that she was not planning on leaving before she had done something significant at the company, which is really weird. This is, whistleblowers, I think, in general, are odd people, in just a flank. And I will say this, it's definitely true of Frances.
But how did you get her to trust you? Because if they're going to whistleblow, they usually choose one person they're going to do it with.
Yeah, it was, I think that was, she'd seen some of the work we'd done about India and just absolutely focusing on, and she was very focused on people in the developing world and the effects that social media, and in particular Facebook, had on them. She, I think, had seen that work, and then I think the first meeting we had, she was sort of auditioning me, and candidly, I came away from it a little bit, it all seemed a little bit too good to be true, in the sense that she, more or less was like, I am trying to figure out, I've already been gathering information, and I'm trying to figure out what information is valuable before I leave, and that's a very weird question for someone to approach you with, and essentially, and so I almost was like, is this a setup? In fact, I was seriously thinking it might be a setup, and then just ran through all the details. If I hadn't contacted her, I would have, if she'd come out of the blue, I would have been pretty worried at that point that something untoward was happening and that I was, wandering into.
So how did you decide that she was legit, so to speak? Was it the documents? She needed the documents?
It was like, I think, no, it was the before sort of any significant, it wasn't like the sort of documents just arrived. We spent 4 or 5 months talking about her sort of theory about how things were going wrong with the company, which wasn't completely different from a lot of other employees, but sort of going back and forth. I think I probably have a bit of a it's sort of like we were almost kind of spitballing, and I was sort of pushing her for, okay, what, why would you say that? Why does this matter? And then we'd have a question over, it was almost like arguing back and forth. It's like bickering in a productive way, and then I think over time, trust developed. I think as our previous speaker noted, spending a lot of time with people on their terms.
In person.
Oh yeah,
In person,
yeah.
not just on the phone.
Yeah, no, and she was. I mean, she was working at that time on the their sort of intelligence-related team. So like looking at how states were potentially misusing the platform. So she was paranoid, kind of reasonably so, because they were looking at like Chinese efforts to infiltrate Facebook and so forth. So like, it was a. It took a while, and it was all in person, and yeah, I think making people feel comfortable with you was pretty key to that. But I don't think any of us had any particular sense that this was like leading toward 20,000 pages of documents until she realized that moving to Puerto Rico had put a expiration date on her Facebook. Facebook told her they couldn't handle an employee. They could handle an employee anywhere around the world during the pandemic. They could not handle one in a U.S. territory. Therefore, she either had to come back to the States or be out of the company in 3 weeks, or a little under a month. And at that point, she sort of started poking around a little more broadly in the systems.
How about this mushroomed, grew into a series, 15 to 20 stories, major stories. And that takes organizational ability in a project like this. How did you organize it? How did you break it down? I'm going to talk to both of you in a second.
So that's an amazing segue into the fact that I have moderately severe ADHD, and so organizational traits are actually not something I do at all. So I mean what became apparent, I think, was very much a surprise to both Frances Haugen and myself, was how much information was accessible. Facebook, the platform, was not that different than Facebook, the company, in the sense that everything was there. It was just wildly disorganized and sort of not indexed in any functional sense. And so it was, I think, a little breathtaking for both her and I. It was all done in very much of a rush. Like the final days were just. She was documenting in Puerto Rico before she left. She was documenting things. Eventually, those documents obviously did end up in our hands. But there was like kind of a bit of a method to the madness. But I came back with 20,000 odd screenshots that were not in any functional sense. They were blurry, they were overlapping.
One thing to point out is you pointed out that you felt a big mistake in this series. Maybe you could talk about this, Keith, was that you had all these documents, you published a lot of stories based on the documents, but you didn't publish enough of the documents, when they came out. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there was a lot of internal debate about this. And we did publish like good bits of the document, parts of the document that supported the story. There were legal reasons for not being able to put all of them out there, and a lot of debate about it. And in the end, I think maybe the public would have been better served had we put them all out there, but I'm not sure that we legally could from our. Yeah,
this is the from a reporting point of view, I think that was something that it definitely hurt not to be able to share that stuff as broadly as I would have liked. But at the same time, I'm not positioned to like say that we didn't have institutionally reasons to be, shall we say, legally conservative on that front.
And also, he pointed out to me, by the way, so did you have a search tool that you could find like Zuckerberg in the documents? He said no, they had to go like through every document to find out particular things.
Yeah, these were, I mean, I think that was one of the things that just sort of with the early stages of the project, because like I really honestly like, okay, me sort of having access to this stuff was okay, that's like fantastic, obviously this is a great resource, but like, dog just caught a car, what are we gonna do with all this? And it wasn't organized, and I think this is a place where it was really good to have Brad Reagan as an editor. I think we've all worked with him a good deal, and Brad gently suggested that I was going to fall on my face if I proceeded, solo. And he was, I was like, I did not disagree with that.
No, I think you initially had 8 or 10 reporters on the project, each was broken down. I wanted to ask you, Emily, talk about what your role was and the challenges you faced, particularly in working with Jeff or whatever,
Totally reasonable question. Yeah.
So I remember getting a call from Brad in the spring saying that Jeff had gotten like a treasure trove of stuff. He was very mysterious,
Yes.
but that I needed to be well positioned with crucial sources so that when the time came, I could be able
He was that cagey?
reach those people. Pretty cagey, yeah.
Wow.
And so he was kind of like keeping me posted. I was not as involved with the document gathering. And then when the time came, as everything was happening, it was like crunch time. I felt like this was the moment, talking to Mike's point, and he's been a mentor of mine too, of like, when you call in your sources and they need to pick up, meet with you. I had one person who walked off from like the 17th hole of his golf game where he wasn't supposed to have his phone, and I'm like, you must pick up the phone. Like, this is the time. And Marcella and Jamie, our other editors back there, were very supportive in recognizing like when to peel away, when to work on a project. And I write about business leaders and governance, and so for me, and had also worked with Keach and Jeff on tech, money, and politics reporting, so it was like trying to figure out the impact of all of this incredible reporting that they had done and to try to help make sense of it as it was all unfolding.
Okay, Keach, talk about your role, okay, and the challenges that you had.
Well, I'm a media reporter,
Okay.
so I got a call in May, I guess that was the May of 2021, just saying that same thing. Jeff had a huge number of documents, and could I help sort of swim through them and find some stories? And it had already been a lot of work, and I remember you had this list of like dozens of story ideas. Does this ring a bell,
Yeah,
right?
too many story
Yeah,
ideas.
many story ideas from thousands of documents, and so the ones that were more media-ish, which ended up being the one about what we call MSI, but when Facebook changed its algorithm to be more towards friends and family, and it made everyone very angry and behaved abominably on the internet. That was something that was close to my beat, so I had sources that I'd already.
So it was passed off to you, all that.
Right, and there were a few others about politics and one about Breitbart that touched my beat, so I already had sources that could kind of confirm these anecdotes that were like glanced at from the documents. And also these algorithmic changes, like the one that Facebook, it was kind of fascinating to be able to see inside, because I cover publishers. So for 5 years, publishers had, or what happened 3 years, been complaining about this algorithmic change that hurt their traffic and why, and it had this huge impact you could see from the outside. To be able to see from the inside all these data scientists telling the real reason why they did it, which wasn't the reason that that Mark Zuckerberg said was to make everyone talk to their neighbors and friends more, but just because they were losing engagement internally. So it was also kind of like a whodunit from my own beat that I was able to answer questions that we had for a long time.
But see, you're talking about documents. I'm wondering how important was sourcing of human sources in this whole series, given that you had so many documents that gave you the facts? Did you have to go to other sources and cultivate them to kind of interpret it, put background? I mean, how valuable were they in light of this investigative series?
Valuable, right? There were people that showed up in the documents that we knew from our beat reporting and relationships that existed. So we were able to confirm anecdotes and sort of flesh things out into full stories for that reason. Yeah.
The names were really helpful just for us to be able to go. I mean, you were working off of everyone who was in those documents for the meaningful social interaction, right, and how that came to be. And then, so I think that was another advantage that I think we had, was just that you could see who worked on what in a way that one can't if one's just like searching LinkedIn or looking at people's job titles.
Were they sometimes startled when you got in touch with them? Because some of the stuff is hard to plot.
We tried to be. I think we tried to be pretty discreet in terms of what not making. Hey, we've got 20,000 documents. Seems like a bad opener. But I think it's one of those things where if you're able to at least ask a few questions and demonstrate that you're sort of halfway there, people are so much happier to help you with the remaining half. Right?
Let's talk about Facebook public relations. When did you decide to go with them? When you had some of the stuff where you had it all in a bow tie, with your 20,000 documents in.
I don't think there were any
Or what?
bow ties ever in this, sadly. But the I think that was a like all of the stories were mostly together. I think before it was it was a few months until I think we were comfortable sort of having that kind of chat with the company, because I mean even obviously they were not going to be happy about this, and I think we were still somewhat concerned that while they have never actually pursued a whistleblower action or an action against a whistleblower, to the best of my knowledge, I mean maybe there's something private. It seemed like this had potential to get real weird given the scale of what we had, and so I think we tried to be pretty quiet until the last possible moment. But that was weeks ahead.
So you let them know we got everything.
Yeah,
I mean,
but,
this one, we got everything.
the last possible moment was like 3 weeks to a month out, given how much work we all had going on with that. So, and I think there were also.
There was some
But you also stated, like, because Emily's is probably, I think still is, we haven't talked in a while, but I suspect still is very well sourced with people who are familiar with the board world at the company. And so I think there was a lot of concern about going too early and what might occur. But I mean, Facebook has actually always been, for us, knock on wood, pretty. They played fair in sort of it's not like we give them a call and then 5 minutes later something is on some other
say fair,
website.
what do you mean? They say, oh yeah, you're completely right.
No, absolutely not.
I mean,
But
how much pushback did they give you in what way?
I guess the idea that we were that we wanted to give them enough time to respond to everything and to because it wasn't exactly as if this is the sort of thing that you could call them 24 hours in advance and say, yeah, we're going to need to comment by 3 p.m. Okay, thanks, bye. And so but they've been, I think, pretty fair in terms of not attempting to do anything that would be not leaking things to somebody else, not doing something like that. So I think that made it a little easier, but it was still a pretty weird rush.
So, the documents that Francis Houghton gave you were also shared with other media companies. Did that affect your strategy in terms of what you wrote and published and when?
We didn't entirely know that was going to happen. We did not know that was going to happen. I think that's one of the reasons why, too. I think it was, in hindsight, it would have been nice to have had, if we had been able to put out more of the documents. But there was I think we were sort of, we'd gotten out 6 or 7 or 8 stories, I think, before they sort of made it to anyone else, and there was kind of an embargo on that for that other group as well. Things got very busy at that point. I mean, we weren't done publishing stories ourselves, so we still had some topics, but it was, I guess it,
I mean, you didn't feel like I might be feeling, I've got these 3 pieces on the hopper, they're being edited, so-and-so might come out with them.
Oh, it was
first,
the, the
same topic.
Oh, yes.
So should we move this up a week?
No, as soon as they posted it, it was like the thread was totally,
yeah, but no, it was awful. I mean, and it was, I think this is another thing where, this is a place where my initial instinct had been to try to space out the stories. The journal, in no uncertain terms, made clear that its instinct was to run, just 5 stories in 1 week. Just go. Francis Haugen and I both hated that idea, independently. It's not, we were not conferring on this. We both hated it. I derisively referred to the publishing strategy as Shark Week.
Also, asking Facebook or Meta for rebuttal, you're kind of saying, we need this tomorrow. It's a shorter timeline for rebuttal.
They had a couple of weeks on. They knew all of those stories going in, but And in fact, when I thought I had defeated Shark Week through making jokes about it, but that did not succeed. And when told that I had not, I actually cried in the newsroom at that juncture because I did not think we were going to be able to make it out of that alive. Like I was like, okay, well, how many corrections are we eating on each of these things? Because it was a lot going on, and that's again where having, I mean, so I'd say that like it's one of the things that like. I was kind of my instinct before. Brad, I think, definitely was like, you need the help, and he was right. But I think another thing, in addition to just sort of the ability to move quickly, was having kind of different voices. Brad Reagan, who, if he ever listens to this, will know that I know that he thinks I'm an awful writer.
All investigative reporters are awful writers.
Yeah, it's actually like, you try to fit in too much, but was, I think, very correct, even if I weren't a middling writer. Brad would have been correct in saying that, you know, all the stories need to have a different voice, and that sort of the storytelling was, so that kind of got us through, I think, you know, my concern about just having everything just jumbled into 1 week is that they all read differently. Georgia Wells, who is not here tonight, she is a fairly new mother and back in San Francisco, was the lead writer of the teen mental health story that a whole bunch of states sued on today. I kept on just like telling her like, all right, like we got the documents, like let's just write off the documents. Like, why do you keep on talking to teenage girls? Like, I wasn't that much of a jerk or like that dumb, but I was close. And like it turns out that yeah, the documents were important, but actually the story she pulled together on just sort of what the lived experience was of people who were downstream from these documents was like incredible. So I think that was like a big part of getting us through Shark Week.
Yeah, the story on teens really transformed the way a lot of people talk, think about their children. You mentioned kids, you've got 3 children, right? You said it changed the way you thought about it, right?
Yeah, I remember the day that story published. I was at an all-girls camp, and and I mean, it's all anyone could talk about, right? Like the moms were freaked out.
I would just add too on the sourcing side, and I hadn't had this happen before, but I had some sources from doing different kind of political reporting who I didn't think would be helpful ended up saying the kids, like, and they would talk because they had, one person had like a 5-year-old son, another person had a 7-year-old daughter, and they felt very personally upset and frustrated and discouraged at how this company was being operated, and that ended up being this whole other sourcing avenue to talk to people through their personal frustration with a company, which I had not run into as a reporter before.
And also that transformation in terms of how many Americans view Instagram, and their teenagers is almost very different from how Congress reacted. A lot of talk about transparency, but not like they haven't done much. Am I right?
Without judging the quality, I don't know why anyone would attack the ability of Congress to get things done. Why would you do that? I think that was a thing that we get into this a little bit in terms of all right, so it was just we put everything we had into it for a very long time, and I think the question of impact was all right, like yes, Instagram folded Instagram Kids. Right, in response to that story that Georgia wrote, and then another one about some somewhat aggressive efforts to think about whether they wanted users below the age of 13, which raised some issues depending on how they were going to do that. They folded on that. I'm sorry, they paused Instagram for Kids. They have not yet unpaused that. But kind of aside from that, there was obviously a lot of hearings, but in terms of sort of things immediately changing,
To be clear, if I'm saying Meta or Facebook essentially hasn't changed the way it does things, based on what you right.
All right, briefly taking off my Wall Street Journal hat and putting on the hat of the guy who just closed out a book that's coming out shortly on this stuff, I will say that the documents that have come out since indicate a certain consistency of approach from the company. So, I think there were a lot of people, even inside the company, who were upset. But again, to borrow slightly from some stuff in my book, the
You're only allowed pictures,
the damage to, this is from a marketing presentation done early in 2022. The damage to Facebook's brand, in terms of users saying whether they thought the company was good for the world, whether it cared about them, whether it was good for political discussion, that was lasting. It took well over a year for things to start recovering. The damage to Facebook usage was over in 3 days. After they peaked, when Frances Haugen went public, briefly, and then it was all done.
But the lawsuits haven't stopped. You and I were talking about today, you had, was it 41 states filing a lawsuit based on the documents that you guys got, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have,
So
the
it's-
state AGs have done their own stuff, but definitely, I mean, they credited Haugen and the stuff that came out of those documents with sort of bringing together kind of the impetus for a massive bipartisan thing. So I mean, I think there's, and then there's, I have been told that things have influence in Europe to some degree, that some of the BSA, was influenced by the stuff that came out, but I don't know that, like, I mean, I think this is just an interesting thing. Like, it's not like, like somebody went to jail or the company collapsed, or, I mean, they're doing great. Earnings is tomorrow. I mean, it seems like, everything's always pretty profitable, and so I don't know that. I think it's kind of. I don't know that it was like immediate gratification on that.
Can I add something just to tip my hat to for a moment? I think that, first of all, Facebook is rebranded as Meta, and we know that they actually had to delay that entire campaign because of this whole story.
We are not sure.
Okay.
But keep going. Yeah. I don't think
Can't remember if we put that in the story.
No,
Sorry.
we can't take
Let's
credit.
scratch that from the record.
Yeah. One source, single source on that one.
Yeah. Sorry. What I will also say is the reputational impact on the company, I think, cannot be understated. Facebook for many years was a high-flying, hot tech company where a lot of people wanted to work, and I think that Jeff's reporting and working on this team, it is not viewed as this sexy hot company to work for anymore, because there are implications from the reporting, and so it's hard to measure overall reputational impact, but a lot of people have since left and people were frustrated, and it didn't have the same kind of shine that it had before, and I still hear that too talking to people today. So just to
This in terms of company change behavior, there's a lot of concern today expressed about AI-driven algorithms producing political ads preceding the 2024 election. I mean, just a plethora of them. Do you see, based on what you know of Facebook, are they going to be able to control inaccurate or bad stuff better than they did in 2020?
That is a little bit more predictive than I would like to get. I will say that I think the company still has not entirely settled the question from 2016 as to whether it is responsible for what it recommends, and also whether whether it has any position whatsoever on content quality. So I think the idea of second guessing what algorithmic systems, which are correctly tuned for personalization to the best of the engineer's capacity, second guessing the outcomes of that is something the company has never been comfortable with at a high level, and so I think there were and I think still are concerns from people inside the company that if you just are not taking any stance whatsoever on quality or on source of information, or on even tactics used to amplify and spread information, that you are going to have a problem. So, but I think to some degree it's going to be an interesting landscape, because Twitter's just so. I mean, it's just Twitter really sort of has changed the landscape for, I think, what people are. The Overton window for social media has really adjusted a little bit recently. So.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question, then I'm going to let you go. I want to start with you, Jeff, when you think about the one or two things you learned most, either reporting-wise or content-wise, from this investigative series, what would you say it was?
Let's go with reporting wise. I don't think I've ever seen a delta so great between like, okay, there's, obviously those documents had the potential to be pretty amazing. I don't think we ever really encountered from the journal much, nobody was ever like, I don't know, is it really, is this really worth doing? Like, how about we just do one story? Like that was never a thing that we
You
got.
said they were willing to pour tons of resources.
Yeah, absolutely. The journal was excellent at that, and I think that the gap between like what we quote unquote knew when we started the thing and actually getting it into shape where it was going to be compelling and where that information could be reliably transmitted to an audience was like far more daunting than I mean, I'm always frustrated with that, right? Like any story, you get you got the story pitch. Well, like, oh, now I got to actually report the thing. Damn it, But like in this instance, I think it was just like remarkable watching the journal's machinery on that front, and also watching the the sort of different styles of reporting. I mean, I think we sort of like all came in with different places. I was the lead byline on 2 stories, I believe. And there were, as you know, quite a few of them. So that was just getting through that process was it made me appreciate being at the journal. So.
Emily, talk about the most important thing you've done journalistically or in terms of content, your perspective.
I think definitely being part of a team, and it helped me be more of a team player. Sometimes it's hard, nurturing the sourcing relationships and trying to kind of keep it together and make sure your people know you're calling. And I think that this taught me a lot about how to best be a team player and like give what the team needed at crucial moments. And to Mike's point, and I will never forget this, when someone crucial responded to me years ago and I thought they didn't want to talk to me, Mike was like, that's your opening. And then I did fly to Seattle. Your story, like I did the thing that you did because you told me. And there's so many times when I'm talking to sources and I don't ask them for anything, and it felt extremely gratifying in the moment, in that like crunch Shark Week, which I should add was also during the Jewish holidays, and like we were fasting. Jamie, I don't know if you remember these. Like, it's like in the moment, my sources showed up when I needed them, and it felt very gratifying after a lot of years of nurturing those relationships.
Okay, how about you, Keach?
I felt like I just learned what the journal is capable of. It's a big bureaucratic institution, and we, complain about that a lot.
We do.
We really do, and it can be slow, and there can be so many more layers than you think could possibly be necessary. But at a moment like this, you see how the bigness can make something incredible and make something that would not be possible in any other size of institution. So.
Thank you very much, Keach Davey, Jeff Hurwitz, Emily Glazer. Thank you for telling us about the Facebook files.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.